Chapter 1. The night the marked girl bled. The scar ran from Alara's temple to her jaw, a jagged line that had stolen her beauty, her betrothal, and her place in society. She traced it absently as she walked the emptied market square, her basket of herbs clutched tight against her ribs. 3 years since the fire. 3 years since Lord Ashford had looked at her ruined face and called off their engagement in front of the entire court. 3 years of whispers, of turned backs, of living in the shadowed cottage at the village edge, where no one had to see her. The autumn wind carried the scent of rain and something else, something metallic and wrong. Alara quickened her pace, her worn boots silent on the cobblestones. The lamplighters hadn't made their rounds yet, and darkness pooled in the narrow alleys like spilled ink. She shouldn't have stayed so late at the apothecary. Master Finch had needed help sorting the wolfsbane from the monk's hood, and she'd been grateful for the work, for the coins that kept her fed through winter. But now the streets felt hollow, watchful, as though the city itself held its breath. A scream split the night. Alara froze. The sound came from the alley ahead, high, desperate, abruptly cut short. Her pulse hammered against her throat. She should run, should turn back toward the market, toward the tavern, lights still glowing, 3 streets over. But her feet carried her forward, drawn by some terrible instinct she couldn't name. The alley opened into a small courtyard, and there she saw them. 2 figures stood in the moonlight. One was a woman in a torn silk gown, her throat a ruin of blood. The other, Alara's breath caught. He was tall, inhumanly still, dressed in black that seemed to drink the light. His face was beautiful in the way of Renaissance paintings, all sharp angles and pale skin that glowed faintly in the darkness. His hair fell to his shoulders, dark as midnight, and his eyes were crimson. Blood dripped from his mouth. The woman in his arms had gone limp, her head lolling back to expose the torn flesh of her neck. He lowered her carefully to the ground, his movements precise, almost reverent. Then he raised his head and looked directly at Alara. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every story her grandmother had told her, every whispered warning about the creatures that hunted after sunset, came flooding back. The houses, the ancient families, the immortals who ruled the night courts and fed on human blood when the moon rose full. Vampires, you should not be here. His voice was low, cultured, touched with an accent she couldn't place. He straightened slowly, and even that small motion held predatory grace. This is not a place for mortals after dark. Alara's basket slipped from her fingers. Dried lavender and yarrow scattered across the stones. I didn't mean no. He took a step toward her. They never do. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn and flee, to put as much distance between herself and this creature as possible. But her legs wouldn't obey. She stood rooted to the spot, watching him approach with the inexorable certainty of a nightmare. He stopped 3 paces away, close enough that she could see the blood on his collar. The way his chest didn't rise with breath, close enough to see the ancient weariness in those crimson eyes. You are marked. His gaze fixed on her scar, and something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. How? Fire. The word came out, barely a whisper. 3 years ago. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. And yet you live. That is unusual. I'm sorry. She didn't know why she was apologizing, only that the words spilled out on their own. I'll go. I won't tell anyone. Please, it's too late for that. 3 more figures emerged from the shadows behind her. Alara spun, her heart lurching into her throat. They were dressed like nobles, velvet and silk, jewels glinting at their throats, but their eyes held that same unnatural gleam. 2 men and a woman, all beautiful, all deadly. Kale. The woman stepped forward, her smile sharp as broken glass. Playing with your food again? How uncivilized. The vampire who had killed Kale moved faster than thought. One moment he stood 3 paces away. The next he was beside Alara, his hand closed around her wrist. His skin was cold as marble, his grip unbreakable. She is mine, Serafini. His voice had gone flat, dangerous. By the law of the hunt, by the right of first blood, you haven't fed from her. Serafini's eyes narrowed. She's unclaimed. She bears my mark. Kale's fingers tightened fractionally on Alara's wrist. Look at her face. Look and tell me you don't see it. Silence fell across the courtyard. The other vampires stared at Alara, at the scar running down the side of her face. And something passed between them, some understanding she couldn't grasp. Impossible. One of the men stepped closer, his nostrils flaring. The augury burned centuries ago. There are no marked children left, yet here she stands. Kale pulled Alara behind him, his body a shield between her and the others. And by house law, she is under my protection until the council decides her fate. Lucian will want her. Serafini's smile returned, colder than before. You know what she represents, what she could mean for the war. Then Lucian can petition the council. Kale's voice dropped to a growl. But tonight, she leaves with me. Alara's head spun. War, council, marked children. None of it made sense, but the tension crackling through the air was unmistakable. These creatures were about to fight, and she would be caught in the middle. Serafini studied them for a long moment, then inclined her head. Very well. But don't think House Valerian will forget this. Kale, your protection won't last forever. She turned and vanished into the shadows, the two men following. The courtyard fell silent, save for the distant sound of church bells tolling midnight. Kale didn't release Alar's wrist. Can you run? I what? Can you run? He turned to face her, and she saw fear in his eyes, now real, mortal fear. Because they'll be back within the hour, and I cannot fight them all. Alar nodded mutely. Good. His grip shifted, his fingers threading through hers. Then run with me, marked girl. And pray your scars mean what I think they do. He pulled her into the darkness, and Alar ran. Chapter 2. The sanctuary of shadows. They ran through streets Alara had never seen, down alleys that twisted like veins beneath the city's skin. Kale moved with inhuman speed, but he kept pace with her, his hand locked around hers like iron. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Still she ran, because the alternative was worse than death. He pulled her through a gate hidden behind ivy, down stone steps that descended into darkness. The air grew cold, thick with the smell of earth and age. Alara stumbled, and his arm caught her waist, steadying her without breaking stride. Almost there, he said, and his voice held something she hadn't expected: concern. The steps ended in a tunnel. Kale released her hand to touch his palm against the wall, and blue light flared beneath his fingers. Ancient symbols blazed to life, running along the stone like veins of fire. A door materialized where none had been before. He pushed it open and drew her inside. The room beyond stole Alar's breath. It was vast, carved from living rock, with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadow. Candles floated in the air without holders, their flames steady and cold. Books lined the walls, thousands of them, their spines marked with languages she couldn't read. A bed occupied one corner, draped in dark velvet. In the center stood a table set with wine and what looked like medical instruments, all arranged with surgical precision. Kale locked the door behind them. The symbols flared once more, then faded to a dull pulse. We're safe here. For now. Alara's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the nearest chair, her whole body shaking. The reality of what had just happened crashed over her in waves. She'd seen a murder, been claimed by a vampire, run through the city like a hunted animal. None of it felt real. Breathe. Kale crouched before her, his crimson eyes level with hers. You're in shock. That's normal. Normal? The word came out as a laugh, high and brittle. Nothing about this is normal. He studied her face, that same strange intensity from before. The scar. Tell me everything about the fire. Why does it matter? Alara pressed her hand to her temple, feeling the raised tissue beneath her fingers. What does my face have to do with any of this? Because that mark may be the only thing keeping you alive. He rose, moving to the table to pour wine into a crystal glass. 3 years ago, you said. Where were you? The Ashford estate. It was the night before my wedding. The memories came reluctantly, dragged up from the place where she'd buried them. There was a fire in the eastern wing. I was sleeping. By the time I woke, the flames had already. She stopped, her throat tight. The beam fell on me, trapped me. I thought I was going to die. Kale returned with the wine, pressing it into her hands. But you didn't. A servant pulled me out. Thomas. He died 2 days later from the smoke. She took a sip, barely tasting it. Lord Ashford called off the engagement. Said he couldn't marry damaged goods. Something dark passed across Kale's face. Mortals are cruel to their own kind, and vampires aren't? She looked up at him, defiant despite her fear. I saw what you did to that woman. She was already dying. His voice went flat. House Valerian had drained her slowly over 3 nights, savoring her pain. I gave her a swift end. Alara stared at him. You expect me to believe you killed her out of mercy? I expect you to believe nothing. Kale turned away, his hands clasped behind his back. But I will not apologize for what I am. Silence stretched between them. Alara's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this nightmare. The houses, the marked children, the war Serafini had mentioned. None of it made sense. What am I? She asked finally. What did she see in my scar? Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. 200 years ago, there was a human woman, a seer. She prophesied the coming of marked children, mortals born with scars that would hold the key to ending the war between the houses. The vampire lords hunted her children, killed them before they could grow into their power. We thought the line had died out, but you think I'm one of them. I think you survived a fire that should have killed you. I think you carry a mark that matches the descriptions in the old texts. He turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. And I think House Valerian will stop at nothing to claim you before my house does. Alar's hand tightened on the glass. Your house. House Nocturne. We are the smallest of the 5 great families, but we hold the oldest blood. He moved to the bookshelves, trailing his fingers along the spines. For 3 centuries, we have opposed the practice of hunting humans for sport. We feed only from the willing, and we kill only when we must. You killed tonight, to save you. His eyes met hers, and she saw truth there, or what passed for truth in the face of a monster. Though I did not know why until I saw your scar. So what happens now? Ilara set the glass down with shaking hands. You keep me here? Use me as some kind of weapon in your war? No, the word came soft but certain. I give you a choice. You can stay here under my protection while I petition the council for your freedom. Or I can alter your memories, remove all trace of this night, and return you to your cottage with no knowledge of what you've seen. Ilara's breath caught. You can do that? It's forbidden under house law. But for you, I would risk it. He took a step closer, his presence filling the space between them. I swore an oath when I became Nocturne's assassin, to protect the innocent from the predators of my own kind. You are innocent. You deserve to live free of this burden. She should say yes. Should beg him to take these terrible memories away, to let her return to her quiet, lonely life. But something in his eyes stopped her, that ancient weariness, the weight of centuries spent alone. If I stay, she said slowly, will you tell me the truth? About the houses, the war, what this mark really means. Kale studied her face, and for the first time, something like respect crossed his features. Every truth you ask for, I will give, then I'll stay. Ilara met his crimson gaze without flinching. But I want answers. All of them. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're braver than I expected, marked girl. My name is Ilara. Ilara. He tested the name, and it sounded different in his mouth, older, weighted with significance. Then welcome to House Nocturne, Ilara. May you survive what comes next. The candles flickered as if in response, and somewhere in the darkness above, Ilara heard the sound of wings. Chapter 3. The Watcher in the dark. Ilara woke to the smell of blood. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, before remembering where she was. The underground sanctuary. House Nocturne. Kale. The memories rushed back in fragments. The courtyard. The chase. The choice she'd made to stay. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft, the velvet coverlet still warm from her body. She didn't remember lying down. The last thing she recalled was sitting in the chair, listening to Kale explain the basics of vampire society while exhaustion pulled at her limbs. He must have carried her to the bed. The thought sent an uncomfortable flutter through her chest. She pushed it aside and rose, her muscles stiff from the night's flight. The room looked different in what passed from morning. Down here, the floating candles had dimmed to embers, and shadows pooled in the corners like living things. A silver tray sat on the table. Bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a pitcher of water. Her stomach growled despite her unease. She approached cautiously, half expecting some trick. But the food was real and warm. She ate standing up, too restless to sit. You're awake. Ilara spun, nearly choking on a piece of bread. Kale stood in the doorway. She hadn't noticed before, partially hidden by a tapestry. He'd changed his bloodstained clothes for a simple black shirt and trousers, his dark hair pulled back from his face. In the dim light, he looked almost human. Almost. How long was I asleep? She asked, setting down the bread. 14 hours. He moved into the room with that unnatural grace, his footsteps silent. It's evening now. The sun has just set. You don't sleep? Not in the way you do. He gestured to the food. Eat. You'll need your strength. Ilara's fingers tightened around the pitcher. Why? What's happening? House Valerian has petitioned the council for custody of you. The hearing is in 3 nights. His expression remained neutral, but she heard the tension beneath his words. Until then, you cannot leave this sanctuary. Serafini has watchers in the streets above. The bread turned to dust in her mouth. And if the council rules in their favor, then you become House Valerian's property, to do with as they please. Kale's jaw tightened. They will drain your blood slowly, testing it for power. They will read your dreams, search your memories for any trace of the seer's gift. And when they've taken everything you have to give, they will turn you or kill you, whichever serves their purposes better. Ilara's legs went weak. She gripped the table's edge, fighting the wave of nausea. And if Nocturne wins, then you remain under my protection, free to choose your own path when the time comes. He paused, something unreadable flickering across his face. But I will not lie to you, Ilara. House Nocturne has few allies in the council. The odds are not in our favor. She forced herself to breathe, to think past the fear clawing at her throat. Then we need to change the odds. What can I do? Kale studied her for a long moment, and she saw surprise in his eyes. You would fight? I didn't survive 3 years of whispers and cruelty just to become some vampire's pet. The words came out harder than she intended, sharpened by years of buried rage. If there's something I can do, some way to prove I'm not just a prize to be claimed, tell me. A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. There may be a way. but it will require you to trust me completely. I'm in your sanctuary, eating your food, sleeping in your bed. Alara met his crimson gaze. I don't have much choice but to trust you. Trust and necessity are not the same thing. He moved closer, and she caught a faint scent, old books and night air, something else she couldn't name. What I'm about to teach you goes against every instinct you have as a human. If you fail, it could drive you mad. If you succeed, you will never be quite mortal again. Her pulse quickened. What are you talking about? The marked children weren't just prophesied to end the war. They were said to be able to walk in both worlds, human and vampire. To see through our eyes, feel what we feel, without becoming one of us. Kale's voice dropped lower. If you truly carry the seer's blood, I can teach you to shield your mind, to hide your thoughts from those who would read them. It's a skill that takes vampires decades to master, but the texts say the marked learned it in days. And if I'm not marked? Alara asked. If this scar is just a scar, then you'll feel nothing but a headache, and we'll find another way. He extended his hand, palm up. But we must start now. Valerian's watchers grow bolder with each hour. Alara looked at his hand, pale, long-fingered, bearing the weight of centuries. She thought of Lord Ashford turning away from her ruined face, of the villagers who crossed the street to avoid her, of the small, suffocating life she'd been living, waiting to disappear entirely. She placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers, cool and solid. Close your eyes, she obeyed, her heart racing. In my world, the mind is everything. We live for centuries, and memory becomes both prison and palace. His voice wrapped around her like silk. To shield yourself, you must first understand what you're protecting. Tell me, Alara, what is your worst memory? The fire. The answer came instantly, unbidden. The heat, the smoke, the crushing weight of the beam across her chest. Thomas's face as he pulled her free, his hands blistering as he beat out the flames in her hair. I feel it, Cale murmured, and his thumb traced a circle on her palm. The fear, the pain. The moment you thought you would die. His voice grew softer. Now tell me, what is your best? Alara's breath hitched. She searched her memories, pushing past the years of isolation. There a summer afternoon when she was 7, before the betrothal, before everything changed. Her mother had taken her to the river, and they'd spent the whole day catching minnows in glass jars, laughing until their sides ached. Yes, Cale's grip tightened fractionally. Hold that feeling. The joy, the safety, the love. That is your shield, Alara. That is what will keep them out. Something shifted in the air between them. Alara felt it like a key turning in a lock, like a door opening in her mind that had always been closed. For just a moment, she sensed him, not his body, but his presence, ancient, weary, achingly lonely, and beneath it all, a surprise that felt almost like hope. Her eyes flew open. I felt you. Cale released her hand and stepped back, his expression carefully neutral. Then it begins. Chapter 4. Lessons in blood and shadow. For 3 days, Cale taught her to build walls in her mind. They worked in the hours after sunset, when his strength was greatest. He would sit across from her at the table, his crimson eyes fixed on hers, and press against her thoughts like fingers testing a locked door. At first, the sensation made her nauseated, an invasive pressure that turned her stomach and left her dizzy. But gradually, she learned to push back. Think of it as a room. Cale instructed on the second night. Your memories are furniture. Your emotions are windows. When I try to enter, you simply close the door. You make it sound simple. Alara rubbed her temples, fighting off another headache. It feels like you're reaching inside my skull. I am. He poured her more water, his movements precise. But you're learning to keep me out. Yesterday, I could see everything, every thought, every fear. Tonight, I see only shadows. She looked up at him, surprised. Really? Really? Something that might have been pride flickered across his face. You're stronger than most mortals I've known. Stronger than many vampires. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. She took a sip of water, using the moment to study him. Over the past 3 days, she'd noticed things. The way he never ate, but always ensured she had fresh food. How he kept his distance, never touching her unless the lesson required it. The books he read while she slept, philosophy, poetry, texts in languages dead for centuries. He was nothing like the monster she'd expected. Tell me about House Nocturne, she said, setting down the glass. You said you were an assassin. What does that mean? Cale's expression shuddered. It means I kill when my house commands it. But you said Nocturne opposes hunting humans. We do. Heroes, moving to the bookshelves with that restless energy she'd come to recognize. But there are other threats. Rogue vampires who break our laws. Creatures from the old world, who prey on both mortal and immortal alike. And sometimes he paused, his hand resting on a leather-bound tome. Sometimes we kill our own kind, when they become too dangerous to let live. Alara's throat tightened. Have you killed many? More than I can count. He pulled the book from the shelf, but didn't open it. I have walked this earth for 437 years, Elara. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched mortals I cared for grow old and turn to dust while I remained unchanged. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Every death I've dealt weighs on me. But the alternative, allowing monsters to slaughter innocents, weighs more. She heard the pain beneath his words, the centuries of accumulated grief. Is that why you saved me? Because I was innocent? I saved you because he stopped, his jaw tightening. Because when I saw your face, I felt something I haven't felt in 200 years. What? He turned to face her, and the raw honesty in his eyes stole her breath. Hope. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elara's heart beat faster, though she couldn't say why. The prophecy, not just the prophecy. Kale set the book down and moved closer, stopping just beyond arm's reach. In 4 centuries, I have never claimed a human under house law. Never invoked my right to protection. Do you know why? She shook her head, unable to speak. Because claiming someone binds us together. Their life becomes my responsibility. Their safety, my obsession. His hands flexed at his sides. It's an ancient magic older than the houses themselves. Once invoked, it cannot be broken until one of us dies. Elara's mouth went dry. You didn't tell me that. You didn't ask. A muscle jumped in his jaw. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. The moment I spoke the words in that courtyard, I tied your fate to mine. Why? The question came out barely a whisper. If it's such a burden, why claim me at all? Because Serafini would have torn you apart to see if your blood held power. His voice turned rough. Because I looked at you scarred, terrified, but still standing, and I couldn't let them have you. Something shifted in the air between them. Elara felt it like static before a storm, that same sense of connection she'd experienced during their first lesson. She could feel him again, his presence pressing against her newly built shields. But this time, she didn't push him away. Show me, she said. Kale went very still. Show you what? What you felt. When you looked at me. She stood, closing the distance between them. You said I need to understand both worlds. Show me yours. Elara, his voice held a warning, but she saw hunger in his eyes. Not for blood, but for something deeper. Understanding, connection, the simple human need to be seen. Please. He studied her face for a long moment, and she watched him wage some internal war. Finally, he extended his hand. This will hurt, I know. She placed her palm against his. The world exploded. Suddenly she was him, seeing through his eyes. The sanctuary looked different, sharper, every detail in crystalline focus. She could hear her own heartbeat like thunder, smell the blood moving beneath her skin. And she could feel his hunger, ancient and terrible, held in check by iron will. But beneath the hunger was loneliness. Centuries of it, an ache so deep it had become part of him. She felt every lost friends who'd aged and died, lovers who'd begged for immortality he wouldn't give. The slow erosion of his humanity until he could barely remember what it felt like to be warm. And then, overlaying it all, the moment he'd seen her in the courtyard, the shock of recognition, the sudden overwhelming need to protect her, to claim her, to keep this one fragile thing safe in a world that had taken everything else. Elara gasped and pulled back, breaking the connection. Her legs buckled, and Kale caught her, lowering her gently into the chair. I told you it would hurt. His hands lingered on her shoulders, steadying her. That's what you live with. She looked up at him, her eyes stinging. Every day, every moment. He released her and stepped back, his expression carefully blank. Now you understand why most humans beg us to wipe their memories. Why immortality is more curse than gift. But Elara shook her head. Beneath the loneliness, beneath the centuries of pain, she'd felt something else. A core of steel, unbreakable. The same strength that had let him hold on to his principles when other vampires became monsters. I understand why you fight so hard to stay human, she said quietly. Even when you're not. Kale stared at her, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Before he could respond, a bell tolled somewhere far above, deep, resonant, carrying through stone and earth. His expression hardened. The council summons us. The hearing begins tonight. Chapter 5. The Court of Crimson Throne. The council met in a cathedral beneath the city. In chambers so old they predated human memory, Kale led Elara through tunnels carved with symbols that hurt to look at, past doorways guarded by vampires whose eyes tracked their movement with predatory focus. She kept her shields raised, concentrating on the mental walls he'd taught her to build. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced her steps to remain steady. Remember, Kale murmured as they approached a massive iron door. Speak only when addressed directly. Show no fear. And whatever they offer you, do not accept without consulting me first. What kind of offers? Immortality, power, freedom. His jaw tightened. Lies wrapped in honey to make the poison go down easier. The door swung open, and Elara's breath caught. The chamber was circular, its ceiling lost in shadow. 5 thrones rose from the floor, each carved from a different stone: obsidian, marble, jade, ruby, and bone. 4 were occupied. The 5th, she noted, stood empty. House Nocturne arrives, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Kale of the old blood, and the marked human Alara Grey. Kale bowed, a gesture of respect, but not submission. Alara followed his lead, her legs trembling. Approach, commanded the figure on the obsidian throne. He was ancient, she could feel it radiating from him like heat from a forge. His hair was white as snow, his face lined with age. That should have been impossible for a vampire. Let us see what all this fuss is about. Kale's hand brushed the small of her back, guiding her forward. They stopped at the center of the chamber, where a circle of silver had been inlaid in the stone floor. The moment Alara stepped inside, power crackled over her skin like lightning. Well, the woman on the jade throne leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with interest. She wore robes of emerald silk, her black hair coiled like serpents. She does bear the mark. How delicious. The mark proves nothing, Morgana. This from the marble throne, where a man sat with military precision. His face was hard, his eyes cold. Any mortal can be burned. It takes more than a scar to prove prophecy. Then let us test her. Serafini's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. She sat on the ruby throne, resplendent in crimson, her smile sharp and hungry. Let us see if this little mouse can truly shield her mind. As Kale claims, Alara's shield snapped tight. She felt the pressure immediately, not just from Serafini, but from all of them. 4 ancient minds pressing against hers, testing for weakness, searching for cracks. The sensation was overwhelming, like being crushed beneath an ocean. But she held. She thought of her mother at the river, of Thomas pulling her from the flames, of Kale's hand in hers, steady and cool, as he taught her to build walls. The pressure increased, became almost unbearable, but she did not break. Enough. The ancient vampire on the obsidian throne raised his hand, and the pressure vanished instantly. She has the gift. The question is, what do we do with her? Give her to House Valerian, Serafini said immediately. We found her first. By rights of discovery, she is ours. You abandoned your claim when you let Kale invoke protection. The military vampire spoke without looking at her. House Nocturne holds the stronger position. House Valerian offers recompense. Serafini's smile widened. 10 mortals of pure bloodline, willing to serve. Safe passage through our territories for a decade. And she paused, her eyes sliding to Kale. We will forget the matter of Prague. A clean slate for House Nocturne's assassin. Alara felt Kale go rigid beside her. Whatever Prague meant, it cut deep, generous. The ancient vampire murmured. What say you, Kale? Will you trade this girl for your past sins? The chamber fell silent. Alara's heart stopped. She turned to look at Kale, and saw war raging behind his crimson eyes. His hands were clenched at his sides, his jaw tight enough to shatter. No, he said finally, and his voice rang clear. I will not. Serafini's smile vanished. You would choose this mortal over redemption? Over peace with my house? I would choose honor over convenience. Kale met her gaze without flinching. Every time. How noble. Serafini's voice dripped venom. And when your house falls because you protected one insignificant human, what will your honor be worth then? More than your promises. Kale turned to the ancient vampire. Lord Cassius, I invoke the right of trial. Let the girl prove her worth to the council, and let that worth determine her fate. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Even Alara knew enough to understand the right of trial was ancient, dangerous. A test of strength, will, or skill that could end in death. Cassius leaned back in his throne, his expression unreadable. You would risk her life on a trial? I would give her the choice. Kale looked at Alara, and she saw apology in his eyes. It's more than anyone else is offering. Alara's mind raced. She could feel the attention of every vampire in the chamber fixed on her, waiting to see if she would crumble. Part of her wanted to beg them to send her home, to let her return to her small, safe life of isolation and whispers, but she'd felt Kale's loneliness, had seen the centuries of loss he carried, and she'd meant what she said. She hadn't survived this long just to become someone's property. I accept the trial, she said, and her voice didn't shake. Cassius smiled, showing teeth that had been ancient when Rome fell. Brave little mouse. Very well. 3 nights hence, you will face the trial of thorns. If you survive, House Nocturne keeps you. If you fail, he spread his hands. Well, the dead have no house. The dead have no house, the other vampires echoed, and their voices rolled through the chamber like thunder. Take her back to your sanctuary. Kale. Cassius waved his hand in dismissal. Prepare her as you see fit, and pray your faith in her is not misplaced. Kale bowed again and turned, his hand, finding Alara's. His grip was tight enough to hurt, but she welcomed the pain. It meant this was real, that she hadn't just agreed to some nightmare trial. They walked back through the tunnels in silence. Only when the iron door sealed behind them did Kale speak. I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough. I gave you no choice. You gave me the only choice that mattered. Alara stopped, forcing him to face her. What is the trial of thorns? His expression turned bleak. A hunt through the catacombs beneath the city. You'll be given a head start, then pursued by 3 vampires of the council's choosing. If you reach the sanctuary before they catch you, he stopped, unable to finish. And if they catch me, then they feed, and you die. His hands clenched. In 400 years, only 2 mortals have survived the trial of thorns. Alara felt the blood drain from her face, but she forced herself to breathe. To think, then you'll have to teach me to run. Kale stared at her, something like a flickering across his features. You're not afraid. I'm terrified. She met his eyes. But I'd rather die running than live on my knees. His hand came up, almost touching her scarred cheek before he caught himself. 3 days, he said softly. I'll teach you everything I can. Then we'd better start now. Chapter 6. The hours before dawn, Kale transformed the sanctuary into a training ground. He moved furniture against the walls, rolled back carpets to expose bare stone, and extinguished half the floating candles until shadows pooled thick as ink. Alara watched him work with inhuman speed, his movements precise and purposeful. The catacombs are a maze, he said, not looking at her. Narrow passages, sudden drops, chambers that haven't seen light in 1,000 years. The vampires hunting. You will know every twist, every hiding place. Your only advantage is that they'll give you a 30-minute head start. 30 minutes. Alara's mouth went dry. That's all? It's tradition. The trial isn't meant to be fair, it's meant to separate the truly worthy from the desperate. He turned to face her, his expression grim. But 30 minutes is enough. If you're smart, if you're fast, and if you remember everything I'm about to teach you, for the next 3 days. He trained her without mercy. He taught her to move silently, to place her feet so the stone wouldn't betray her. He showed her how to navigate by touch in absolute darkness, how to sense the movement of air that meant a passage opened ahead. He made her memorize the layout of the catacombs, a mental map drawn from his centuries of walking those tunnels. Here, he traced a path on the parchment he'd sketched. The bone gallery leads to the weeping chamber. There's a hidden passage behind the 3rd alcove on the left. Most vampires forget it exists. Alara studied the map until her eyes burned. And if they don't forget, then you run faster. His finger moved to another section. The river of echoes runs beneath the eastern wing. The water is freezing, but it will mask your scent. Stay in it as long as you can bear. She nodded, committing every detail to memory. But it wasn't enough. They both knew it wasn't enough. On the 2nd night, Kale taught her to fight. You can't kill a vampire, he said, handing her a silver dagger. But you can slow one down. He showed her where to strike the throat, the eyes, the joints where even immortal flesh was vulnerable. Pain means nothing to us, but injury takes time to heal. Use that time to run. Alara gripped the dagger, its weight unfamiliar in her hand. Have you ever been hurt like this? Many times. He pulled back his collar, revealing a scar that ran from his collarbone to his shoulder, white against pale skin, the only mark on his otherwise perfect body. Rome, 1804. A rogue vampire with a blessed blade. I barely survived. She stared at the scar, then at his face. Does it still hurt? No, but something in his eyes suggested otherwise. Physical pain fades. It's the other wounds that linger. They trained until her muscles screamed, until she could barely lift the dagger. Kale pushed her harder than she'd ever been pushed, and when she collapsed from exhaustion, he carried her to the bed and brought her food. He never slept, just sat in the chair across from her, reading by candlelight while she recovered. On the 3rd night, with only hours remaining before the trial, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in the bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, her mind racing with everything she'd learned. The map, the passages, the places to hide and the places to avoid. But beneath the practical knowledge was fear, cold and sharp. As the dagger Kale had given her, "You're afraid." His voice came from the darkness. She turned her head, and found him watching her from the chair. His book closed in his lap. "Wouldn't you be? I haven't been truly afraid into centuries." He rose and moved closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. "But I remember what it felt like. The weight in your chest. The way every sound becomes a threat. Does it get easier?" she asked. "Facing death?" "No." He sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance. "It gets more precious. Every breath becomes a gift you didn't know you wanted until you faced losing it." Alara pushed herself up to sitting, pulling the coverlet around her shoulders. "Tell me about Prague." His expression shuddered. "That's not important. It is to me." She met his eyes. "You gave up redemption for me. I deserve to know why it mattered." Kale was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly, he began to speak. "Prague, 1889. I was sent to kill a vampire who'd been hunting children. But when I found him, he wasn't alone. He'd turned a mortal woman, made her into a monster like himself, his hands clenched. House law is clear. New vampires are the responsibility of their makers. If the maker goes rogue, the turn must be destroyed as well. But you didn't want to kill her. She was only 3 months turned. Still remembered what it felt like to be human. She begged me to spare her, swore she'd never hurt another child. His voice dropped. I let her go. Told House Valerian I'd killed her cleanly. They've held that lie over me ever since. Alara's throat tightened. What happened to her? I don't know. I've searched for her for over a century, but she's either dead or very good at hiding. He looked at her, and she saw the weight of that choice in his eyes. Some nights I wonder if I made the right decision. If mercy was worth the price. You did what you thought was right. Alara reached out before she could stop herself, her fingers brushing his hand. That takes more courage than killing. Kale stared at their hands, and she felt that connection spark between them again, the same bond that had formed during their lessons, but deeper now, more personal. His fingers curled around hers, cool and solid. If something happens tomorrow, he started. Don't. She squeezed his hand. Don't say goodbye yet. Alara, I'm going to survive this. She said it fiercely, willing it to be true. I'm going to reach the sanctuary, and when I do, you're going to tell me more about Prague and Rome and every other century you've lived through. Because I want to know. I want to understand you. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. Why? Because in 3 days, you've shown me more kindness than anyone has in 3 years. Her voice cracked. Because you look at me at this scar and you don't turn away. Kale's free hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull back. When she didn't, his fingers traced the line of her scar with infinite gentleness. This mark doesn't diminish you. It proves you're a survivor. Tears stung her eyes. Kale, promise me something. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, careful of the damaged skin. Promise me you'll fight. That you won't give up, no matter how tired you get or how close they come. Promise me you'll survive. I promise. The words came out as a whisper. He held her gaze for a long moment, and she saw everything he wouldn't say written in his eyes. Then he rose, releasing her hand. Rest. You have 4 hours until the trial begins. But as he turned to leave, Alara caught his wrist. Stay, please. Kale looked back at her, surprised. She struggled for words. I don't want to be alone right now. He studied her face, then nodded slowly. He settled into the chair beside the bed, close enough that she could reach out and touch him if she needed to. His presence was a comfort, solid, real, anchoring her in the darkness. Thank you, she whispered. Sleep, Alara. His voice was soft. I'll watch over you. And surrounded by candlelight and shadows, with a vampire's steady gaze keeping the darkness at bay, Alara finally slept. Chapter 7. The Trial of Thorn's entrance to the catacombs yawned before her like a mouthful of teeth. Alara stood at the threshold, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The silver dagger hung at her belt, its weight a cold comfort. Behind her, the council gathered 5 ancient vampires who would decide her fate based on whether she lived or died in the next few hours. Kale stood to her right, his face carved from marble. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the sanctuary, but his hand had found hers in the tunnel, squeezed once, then let go. The rules are simple, Cassius announced, his voice echoing off stone. The mortal enters first. She has 30 minutes to run, to hide, to find her way back to House Nocturne's sanctuary. Then the hunters pursue. Who hunts her? Kale's voice was tight. Cassius smiled. House Valerian has chosen their champion. Serafini herself will run this trial. Alara's blood turned to ice. Serafini, ancient, powerful, and hungry for her blood. She felt Kale tense beside her, his hands clenching. That violates tradition, he said. A council member cannot. House Valerian invoke their right as the offended party. Cassius's smile widened. Would you deny them their justice, Kale? It was a trap. Alara saw it immediately. If Kale protested further, he'd insult House Valerian and weaken Nocturne's position. If he stayed silent, she faced one of the most dangerous vampires alive. I accept the terms, Alara said. Before Kale could respond, every eye turned to her. She forced herself to stand straight, to meet Cassius's ancient gaze without flinching. Brave little mouse, Serafini purred, stepping forward. She wore hunting leathers now, all pretense of nobility stripped away. I'm going to enjoy catching you. You have to catch me first. The words came out steadier than Alara felt. Serafini's smile sharpened to something feral. Oh, I will. And when I do, I'll drain you slowly. Let you feel every second as your life pours into me. Enough. Cassius raised his hand. The trial begins now. Alara Gray, enter the catacombs. May your gods have mercy on you. Alara took one last look at Kale. His crimson eyes burned with something she couldn't name: fear, fury, helplessness. She wanted to say something, to thank him, to tell him that these 3 days had mattered more than he knew. But there was no time. She turned and ran into the darkness. The catacombs swallowed her whole. Alara's footsteps echoed off stone as she sprinted down the first corridor, her hand trailing along the wall for guidance. The map burned in her mind, left at the first intersection, straight through the Hall of Bones, then right into the passage that led to the Weeping Chamber. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she didn't slow down. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her eyes like a physical weight. She'd trained for this, had spent hours learning to navigate by touch and sound. But the reality was so much worse than practice. Every shadow could hide a trap. Every sound could be death closing in. She reached the Hall of Bones and nearly sobbed with relief. Femurs and skulls lined the walls in intricate patterns, their empty sockets watching her pass. The air smelled of dust and decay, of centuries of death compressed into stone. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't think. The Weeping Chamber came next, a vast space where water dripped endlessly from the ceiling, creating pools that reflected nothing in the darkness. Alara splashed through ankle-deep water, searching for the third alcove on the left. There, her fingers found the gap in the stone, narrow enough that she had to turn sideways to slip through. The hidden passage Kale had shown her on the map. It would buy her time. But not much. Behind her, far in the distance, she heard a sound that froze her blood. Laughter. Serafini was coming. Alara forced herself to move faster, squeezing through the passage until it opened into a tunnel she didn't recognize. Panic clawed at her throat. Had she taken a wrong turn? Was this even on the map? No, think. Remember. She closed her eyes, visualizing the parchment Kale had drawn. This had to be the Serpent's Path, the winding tunnel that eventually connected to the River of Echoes. If she could reach the water, she could mask her scent. She ran. The tunnel twisted like its namesake, forcing her to slow down or risk crashing into walls. Her hands were scraped raw from feeling her way through darkness. Her dress was torn, her hair plastered to her face with sweat, despite the cold, and always behind her. That laughter grew closer. The River of Echoes announced itself with sound water rushing over stone, constant and musical. Alara nearly wept when she found it. The river was narrow, waist-deep, and so cold it stole her breath. But she waded in without hesitation, gasping as the icy water closed around her. Her teeth chattered. Her muscles seized. But she forced herself forward, using the current to guide her downstream. Kale had said to stay in as long as she could bear. She made it 5 minutes before the cold became unbearable. Her fingers had gone numb, her lips blue. If she stayed in much longer, hypothermia would kill her before any vampire could. Alara pulled herself onto the bank, shaking so hard she could barely stand. She was in a chamber she recognized from the map, the Garden of Stone, where stalagmites rose like frozen trees. The sanctuary was close now. So close. There you are. Serafini stepped from the shadows, impossibly fast, impossibly silent. Her eyes glowed crimson in the darkness, fixed on Alara with predatory hunger. Did you really think the water would hide you? Serafini circled slowly, a cat toying with prey. I can hear your heartbeat from 3 chambers away. Smell the fear in your sweat. You never had a chance, little mouse. Alara's hand found the dagger at her belt. Her fingers were so cold she could barely grip it, but she pulled it free anyway. Serafini laughed. You're going to fight me? How delicious. I'm going to slow you down. Alara's voice shook, but she raised the blade. That's all I need. Then try. Serafini moved like lightning. Alara barely had time to raise the dagger before the vampire was on her, fangs bared, hands reaching for her throat. She struck out blindly, felt the blade connect with flesh. Serafini hissed and jerked back, black blood welling from a cut across her cheek. You little. Alara didn't wait to hear the rest. She ran. Her legs were lead. Her lungs were fire. But she ran anyway, because stopping meant death. The sanctuary was close, she could feel it. Could sense Kale's presence like a beacon in the darkness. Behind her, Serafini's footsteps echoed like thunder. The corridor opened into a familiar chamber. She recognized the symbols carved into the walls. The faint blue glow that meant sanctuary wards. The door was ahead, so close she could see it. 15 feet. 10. 5. Serafini's hand closed around her ankle. Alara crashed to the ground, her chin cracking against stone. Stars exploded behind her eyes. She felt herself being dragged backward, away from safety, away from Kale. No. She kicked out wildly, connected with something solid. Heard Serafini grunt. Her fingers scrabbled against stone, found a crack, held on. Let go. Serafini's voice was inhuman now, all pretense of civility gone. But Alara didn't let go. She held on with everything she had, even as her fingers bled, even as Serafini's nails dug into her leg. Because Kale had asked her to promise, had asked her to fight, and she would keep that promise or die trying. Chapter 8. Blood and Sanctuary. Sanctuary door exploded outward. Kale emerged like vengeance itself, his eyes blazing crimson, his fangs fully extended. He moved faster than Alara had ever seen him move, closing the distance between himself and Serafini in a heartbeat. Release her. His voice was death incarnate. Serafini's grip loosened in surprise, and Alara wrenched herself free. She scrambled forward on hands and knees, blood streaming from her torn palms, and collapsed across the threshold. The wards flared blue around her, recognizing House Nocturne's protection. She'd made it. She'd survived. The trial is over, Kale snarled, positioning himself between Alara and Serafini. She reached sanctuary. You have no claim. Serafini rose slowly, wiping black blood from her cheek where Alara's dagger had struck. She didn't reach it. I caught her first. She crossed the threshold. The wards accepted her. Kale's hands flexed, and Alara saw claws extending from his fingertips, something she'd never seen before. By council law, she is under House Nocturne's protection. Challenge that, and you challenge me. The air between them crackled with power. Alara pushed herself up on shaking arms, watching two ancient predators face off over her broken body. Every muscle screamed. Her leg throbbed where Serafini's nails had pierced skin. But she was alive. How touching. Serafini's smile returned, cold and calculated. The assassin has developed feelings for his pet human. Tell me, Kale, will you still protect her when you learn what she really is? Enough. Cassius's voice echoed through the chamber. The ancient vampire appeared from the shadows, the rest of the council behind him. The girl crossed the threshold. House Nocturne wins the trial. Serafini's eyes flashed, but she bowed her head. As the council rules, however, Cassius turned his attention to Alara, and she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. The trial has revealed something interesting. The girl's blood called to Serafini even through the river's cold. That level of potency is unusual. Alara's stomach dropped. She felt Kale tense beside her. We require a blood sample, Cassius continued, to verify the extent of her gift. Surely House Nocturne will not object to such a reasonable request? It was another trap. Alara saw it in Serafini's triumphant smile, in the way the other council members leaned forward with barely concealed hunger. They wanted her blood, wanted to test it, taste it, determine exactly how powerful she might be. I object. Kale's voice was steel. The trial is concluded. You have no right, we have every right. Cassius's expression hardened. Or would you prefer we rule the trial invalid due to irregularities? The threat hung in the air. They could take away her victory, force her to run again, let Serafini finish what she'd started. Unless Kale gave them what they wanted. How much? Alara's voice was hoarse, but it carried. Every eye turned to her. She pushed herself to sitting, ignoring the way her vision swam, and met Cassius's gaze. How much blood do you need? Alara, no, Kale started. A vial, Cassius said. Nothing more. Then take it. She extended her arm, palm up, showing the cuts already bleeding from the stone. But you do it here, in front of Kale, with House Nocturne as witness. And when you're done, you leave us alone. Cassius studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Agreed. He moved forward with a glass vial that seemed to appear from nowhere. His fingers were cold as they grasped her wrist, turning her arm to expose the vein at her elbow. She felt a sharp prick his nail-breaking skin, and then her blood was flowing, dark and red, into the vial. The effect on the vampires was immediate. Every one of them went rigid, their eyes fixed on the blood with terrible hunger. Even Kale took a step back, his hands clenched, fighting some internal battle. The air grew thick with tension, with barely restrained predation. Extraordinary, Cassius whispered. He sealed the vial and stepped back, but his eyes never left it. Her blood sings. I haven't felt power like this into centuries. The prophecy is real. Morgana breathed from her jade throne. The marked children have returned. One marked child, Serafini corrected, her smile returning. And now we know exactly how valuable she is. Cassius tucked the vial into his robes and turned to Kale. House Nocturne's protection holds. But know this, assassin, every house in the city will be watching her now. Every vampire who scented her blood tonight will want a taste. Can you protect her from all of us? I will die trying. Kale's voice left no room for doubt. Let us hope it doesn't come to that. Cassius gestured to the others. Come. We have much to discuss. The council withdrew, shadows swallowing them whole. Only Serafini lingered, her eyes fixed on Alara with promise. This isn't over, little mouse. You may have won tonight, but the game has just begun. She smiled, showing fangs. And next time, there will be no sanctuary to save you. Then she was gone, and Alara was alone with Kale. He moved to her immediately, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands hovered over her injuries, not quite touching, as if he was afraid she might shatter. You're hurt. His voice was rough. I can smell your blood. So much blood. I'm alive. She tried to smile, but her face wouldn't cooperate. I kept my promise. You should have let me fight Serafini. Should have let me. He stopped, his jaw clenching. You could have died, but I didn't. Alara reached up with her torn hand and touched his face. He flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. I didn't die, Kale. I survived. His eyes closed, and she saw something crack in his careful control. When I heard her catch you, when I felt your fear through the wards, his voice broke. I thought I'd lost you. You haven't lost me. Her thumb brushed his cheekbone. I'm right here. He opened his eyes, and what she saw there stole her breath. Not hunger, not the predatory focus of a vampire, but something raw and human and terrifyingly vulnerable. I need to heal you, he said quietly. Your wounds are deep. Without help, they'll fester. How? He was silent for a moment. Vampire blood has healing properties. A few drops on your cuts will seal them instantly. Alara's heart skipped. Your blood, yes. He met her eyes. It won't turn you. That requires an exchange, a conscious choice from both parties. But it will heal you. And he hesitated. It will create a bond. Not the claiming bond, but something else. You'll be able to sense me, feel when I'm near, and I'll be able to find you, no matter where you go. Is that why you're hesitating? She asked. Because you don't want to be bound to me? I'm hesitating because once I do this, I won't be able to let you go. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. And you deserve better than a monster who can't give you a normal life. Alara looked at him, this ancient creature who'd protected her, trained her, believed in her when no one else would, who'd given up redemption rather than trade her away, who'd stood against his own kind to keep her safe. What if I don't want normal? She said softly. What if I want this? Kale stared at her, and she watched him wage some terrible internal war. Finally, he raised his wrist to his mouth and bit down. Black blood welled from the wound, and he held it over her torn palms. Then forgive me, he whispered. The blood touched her skin, and Alara gasped. It burned like ice and fire together, spreading through her veins in waves. She felt her wounds closing, felt torn flesh knitting back together. But beneath the physical healing was something else, a connection snapping into place like a key in a lock. Suddenly she could feel him. Not just his presence, but his emotions. The fear that had gripped him during the trial. The relief flooding through him now. And beneath it all, something deeper. Something he'd been hiding since the moment they met. He cared for her. More than he should. More than was safe. And God help her, she cared for him too. Chapter 9. What lives between mortal and forever. Ella awoke to silence and the scent of old books. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the memories flooded back. The trial, the chase, Serafini's claws in her leg. She sat up quickly, her heart racing, and looked down at her hands. Smooth, unmarked. Not even a scar remained where Serafini had torn her skin, but beneath her healed flesh, she felt something new. A warmth that pulsed in time with her heartbeat, spreading from her palms through her entire body. And with it came awareness, a sense of presence nearby, watching, waiting. Kale. She found him standing by the bookshelves, his back to her, perfectly still. He'd changed clothes again, traded the blood-stained shirt for dark linen that made him look almost mortal in the candlelight. Almost. How long was I asleep? She asked. 6 hours. He didn't turn around. Your body needed time to adjust to the healing. Alara swung her legs off the bed and stood. Her muscles ached, but the pain was distant, manageable. I can feel you. I know. His shoulders tensed. The bond settles within the first day. It will fade somewhat after a week, but you'll always know when I'm near. Always be able to find me if you need to, and you'll be able to find me. Yes. Finally, he turned to face her. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could feel his emotions now, a tumult of guilt, concern, and something else he was trying desperately to hide. I'm sorry. I should have warned you more clearly about the bond's effects. You saved my life. Alara crossed the distance between them. Don't apologize for that. I bound you to a monster. His voice went harsh. You should be free to walk away, to forget this nightmare, and return to your life. Instead, you're tied to me, to my world, whether you want it or not. Kale, do you know what this means? He gestured sharply at the space between them. Every vampire in this city knows your blood is powerful now. Cassius will share that vial with the other houses. Let them taste what you are. They'll hunt you, use you, fight wars over who gets to claim you. Then we fight back. Alara's jaw set. Together. He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You don't understand what you're saying. The houses don't forgive, don't forget. Once they mark you as valuable, you'll never be safe again. I haven't been safe since the fire. The words came out harder than she intended. Do you think I had a life before this? I lived in a cottage at the edge of town, where no one had to look at me. I worked for scraps. I went days without speaking to another human being because they couldn't stand the sight of my face. Her voice cracked. At least here, with you, I'm not invisible. Kale's expression shattered. He closed the distance between them into strides and cupped her scarred cheek with infinite gentleness. You were never invisible. You were magnificent. The word hung between them, raw and honest. Alara's breath caught. She could feel his emotions through the bond now: admiration, protectiveness, and underneath it all, a longing so deep it ached. I'm not magnificent, she whispered. I'm just a girl with a scar who got caught up in something she doesn't understand. You faced the trial of thorns and survived. You stood before the council and demanded they take your blood on your terms. His thumb traced the line of her scar. You are the bravest person I've known in for centuries. Kale and I. He stopped, his jaw clenching. Through the bond, she felt him warring with himself, struggling against words that wanted to escape. I should not feel this way. Should not want. He released her abruptly and stepped back. Forgive me. This bond makes everything more intense. It will fade. But Alara knew he was lying. She could feel it through their connection, the lie wrapped around a truth he was too afraid to speak. Because the bond hadn't created his feelings. It had only made them impossible to hide. What if I don't want it to fade? She asked quietly. He went very still. Don't say that. Why not? Because I'm mortal? Because you think I don't understand what I'm asking for? She moved closer, refusing to let him retreat. I feel what you feel, Kale. I know you care for me. And she took a shaky breath. I care for you too. You can't. His voice was anguished. I'm 400 years old. I've killed more people than you've met in your lifetime. I feed on blood. I'll watch you age and die while I remain frozen in time. There is no future for us. Then we'll have now. Alara reached up and took his face in both hands, forcing him to look at her. These past days with you have been more alive than 3 years of existing. You see me, Kale. Not my scar. Not what I used to be. You see me. I see you, he whispered, and his control finally broke. His hands came up to cover hers, holding them against his face. God help me, Alara. I see you and I want. He stopped, his eyes closing. I want things I have no right to want. Then take them. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I'm giving you permission. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly what I'm offering. She rose on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. I'm offering trust, connection, whatever time we have before the houses come for us. I'm offering you the same thing you offered me, a choice. Kale's eyes opened, blazing crimson with barely restrained emotion. If I kiss you, I won't be able to stop. Won't be able to pretend this is just duty or protection or the bond making us feel things we don't. Good. Alara's voice was steady. Because I don't want you to pretend. For one eternal moment, he simply stared at her. Then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might shatter. But Alara pressed closer, her hands sliding into his hair, and something in him surrendered. His arms came around her waist, pulling her against him, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and real. She tasted night on his lips, felt centuries of loneliness pouring through their bond. And beneath it all, a hope so fragile it broke her heart. She kissed him back with everything she had, trying to show him that he wasn't alone anymore. That she was here, choosing him, choosing this. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kale rested his forehead against hers. This is madness, he whispered. I know. Alara's fingers traced the line of his jaw. Do it anyway. He laughed, a sound she'd never heard from him before, rough and genuine. You're going to be the death of me, Alara Gray. I thought you were already dead. I was. His arms tightened around her. Until you. They stood there in the candlelight, wrapped in each other, while the world above prepared for war. And for just a moment, neither of them cared. But peace never lasted long in the world of houses. The sanctuary wards flared suddenly, blazing blue with warning. Kale's head snapped up, his body going rigid. They're here, he said, and his voice carried death. House Valyrian is attacking. Chapter 10. The price of Forworthy Sanctuary shook as something massive struck the wards. Kale moved with inhuman speed, positioning himself between Alara and the door. His fangs extended fully, his eyes blazing crimson, every trace of the gentle creature who'd kissed her moments ago, replaced by the assassin he truly was. How many? Alara's voice was steadier than she felt. At least 6. Maybe more. He didn't take his eyes off the door. Serafini brought reinforcements. Another strike. The blue wards flickered, dimmed. Ancient magic could only hold so long against sustained assault. What do we do? Alara asked. We? Kale turned to look at her, and she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. You hide. There's a passage behind the bookshelf that leads deeper into the catacombs. You take it and you run, and you don't stop until no. The word came out flat, final. I'm not leaving you. Alara, you said I was brave. You said I was magnificent. She moved to the table and picked up the silver dagger he'd given her for the trial. Then trust me to fight beside you. You'll die. His voice cracked. I won't survive watching you die. Then we'd better not lose. She crossed to him and took his hand, feeling their bond pulse with shared determination. Together, Kale, we face this together. For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression: acceptance, pride, and a love so fierce it took her breath away. Together, he agreed. The words shattered. Serafini came through first, moving like liquid shadow, her eyes fixed on Alara with predatory hunger. Behind her came 5 more vampires in House Valyrian's colors crimson and black, all teeth and claws and ancient power. How sweet. Serafini's smile was razor sharp. The assassin and his pet, ready to die for each other. I'll make sure to savor every drop when I drain you both. You'll have to catch us first. Kale's voice dropped to a growl, then chaos erupted. Kale moved like death incarnate, meeting the first vampire with claws extended. They collided in a blur of motion, too fast for Alara's eyes to follow. Blood black as ink sprayed across the stone walls. 2 more vampires rushed toward Alara. She remembered Kale's training: the throat, the eyes, the joints. She dropped low as the first one lunged, drove her dagger up under his chin. He screamed, a sound that scraped along her nerves, but she held on, twisted the blade. He dissolved into ash. Alara stared at her hands, at the ash coating her fingers. She'd killed a vampire. Actually killed one. Behind you. Kale's shout snapped her back. She spun, raising the dagger, but the second vampire was already on her. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Her vision sparked with black dots. She kicked out wildly, connected with his stomach, but he didn't even flinch. Such powerful blood, he hissed, his fangs descending toward her throat. I can smell it singing in your veins. Alara's hand scrabbled at her belt, found something: a vial of holy water Kale had given her. She smashed it into the vampire's face. He shrieked and dropped her, his skin blistering where the water touched. She didn't wait. She drove the dagger into his chest, felt it sink deep between his ribs. He exploded into ash, and she collapsed to her knees, gasping. 3 down, 3 to go. Kale fought like a demon, holding off 2 vampires at once while his blood dripped from a gash across his shoulder. He was strong, but even he couldn't hold forever. Serafini watched from the doorway, her smile never wavering. Impressive, but futile. She moved. One moment she stood by the door. The next she was on Alara, her hand wrapped around Alara's wrist, her fangs bare. Alara felt the dagger torn from her grip, heard it clatter across stone. I told you I'd catch you, little mouse. Serafini's breath was cold against Alara's neck. And now I'm going to. Kale hit her like a freight train. They crashed across the room, a tangle of fangs and claws. Alara scrambled for the dagger, her fingers closing around the hilt. She turned just in time to see one of the remaining vampires rushing toward her, but this time, she was ready. She ducked his grab, came up inside his guard, and drove the dagger into his eye. He screamed and staggered back. She didn't give him time to recover. She grabbed one of the floating candles, ignoring how it burned her palm, and shoved it into his mouth. Fire erupted. The vampire thrashed, clawing at his face, then crumbled to ash. 4 down. Kale had killed another, but the effort cost him. More blood flowed from wounds across his chest and arms. He moved slower now, his strength fading. And Serafini circled him like a shark, sending blood and water. You can't win, Kale. Serafini's voice was almost gentle. You're outnumbered, wounded, and her eyes slid to Alara. She's just human, fragile, breakable. She's stronger than you'll ever be. Kale's voice rang clear despite his injuries. Then prove it. Serafini smiled. Choose, fight me, or save her when my last hunter tears out her throat. The remaining vampire, a woman with silver hair and dead eyes, turned toward Alara. She moved with terrible purpose, claws extending, murder written in every line of her body. Alara raised the dagger, knowing it wouldn't be enough. The vampire was too fast, too strong. She was going to die, but then power surged through her, not from the dagger, but from within. The bond with Kale blazed like fire in her veins, and suddenly she could feel everything he felt. His strength, his speed, his 400 years of fighting experience. She moved without thinking, her body flowing through motions she'd never learned. The vampire's claws whistled past her face. Alara twisted, brought the dagger up, and drove it home with inhuman precision. The vampire dissolved into ash. Silence fell across the sanctuary. Serafini stared at Alara, her expression shifting from triumph to shock to rage. What are you? I'm the girl you underestimated. Alara's voice didn't shake. And I'm done being afraid of you. Serafini's eyes blazed. You think killing a few newborns makes you powerful? I am 3 centuries old, child. I have destroyed armies. And you are not alone. Kale appeared beside Alara, his hand finding hers. Despite his wounds, despite the blood loss, he stood tall, united, and through their bond, Alara felt their combined strength. Not just his power, but hers, the marked child's gift, finally awakening. The ability to walk between worlds, to share strength with those she chose to bind herself to. Serafini saw it too, saw the power thrumming between them. And for the first time, Elara saw fear in the ancient vampire's eyes. This isn't over, Serafini hissed. House Valerian will answer to the council for attacking a protected human. Cassius's voice rolled through the chamber like thunder. The ancient vampire appeared in the doorway. His expression, carved from ice. Behind him stood the rest of the council, their eyes fixed on Serafini with cold judgment. You violated sacred law, Cassius continued. Attacked a human under house protection. Broke sanctuary wards. These crimes carry only one punishment. Serafini's eyes widened. My lord, I was only exile. The word fell like a death sentence. From this moment, you are cast out from House Valerian. Cast out from the council. Cast out from every territory we hold. Cassius's eyes blazed. Run, Serafini, and pray we never find you again. Serafini's face twisted with rage and despair. For one moment, Elara thought she might attack anyway, might throw away everything for one final strike. But then survival instinct won. She turned and fled into the darkness, her footsteps echoing away into nothing. Cassius turned his attention to Kale and Elara. His expression softened barely. But enough, the marked child has proven herself, he said quietly. And House Nocturne has proven worthy of protection. Go in peace. He paused. Both of you. Then he was gone, taking the council with him. Elara's legs gave out. Kale caught her, lowering them both to the floor. They sat amid the ashen blood and broken wards, holding each other while the adrenaline drained away. We're alive, Elara whispered. We're alive, Kale agreed. And his voice held wonder. She pulled back enough to look at him, really look at him. His wounds were already healing, black blood clotting, torn flesh knitting back together. But his eyes held something she'd never seen before. Peace. What happens now? She asked. Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then he raised her hand to his lips and kissed her scarred palm. Now, we choose. You can still walk away, Elara. Return to your cottage, your mortal life. I'll ensure the houses never touch you again. And if I choose to stay, then I teach you everything. About vampire society, about your gift, about the power awakening inside you. His thumb traced her knuckles. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I offer you a choice I've never offered anyone in 400 years. Her breath caught. Immortality. Not now. Not for years. Maybe decades. Not until you've lived every moment of your mortal life. His voice dropped to a whisper. But someday, if you still want it, I would turn you. Make you my equal in truth, not just in spirit. Walk beside you for eternity. Tears stung Elara's eyes. You'd do that? Wait decades for me? I've waited for centuries for you already. Kale's smile was soft, real. What's a few more years? She kissed him then, tasting blood and ash and hope. And through their bond, she felt his joy bright and clean and absolutely certain. I choose this, she whispered against his lips. I choose you. All of it. Then welcome home, Elara Grey. Kale gathered her closer, his arms, a sanctuary more powerful than any wards. Welcome home.